Have you ever been told you're not good enough, only to have the universe conspire to help you prove everyone spectacularly wrong? It's a sweet kind of justice, isn't it? Today, I'm going to tell you about Alara Vance, a young woman who was publicly humiliated, kicked out of an elite pilot camp, and branded a failure. But Commander Rex Thorne, the man who cast her out, picked the wrong woman to underestimate. Stay with me to hear how Alara not only cleared her name, but, in an act of breathtaking audacity, landed an F-22 Raptor right back on their turf in front of everyone who had written her off. Where are you all watching from today? I'd love to know. And drop a comment below if you've ever had that burning desire to fight back and prove your worth against all odds. The air at the Aces High Flight Academy always seemed to crackle with a mixture of jet fuel and ambition. Alara Vance breathed it in, a familiar scent that was both a comfort and a constant, pressing reminder. Comfort, because it was the perfume of her childhood, the smell of her father, Colonel Marcus Vance, a pilot whose legend still echoed in the stories told by older instructors. A reminder because his recent, sudden illness and passing had left a void in her life as vast as the skies he had once commanded. She was here not just for herself, but to honor that legacy, to prove that his teachings, his passion, had taken root in fertile ground. She was quiet, almost studiously so, her observations keen, her demeanor a stark contrast to the boisterous, peacocking cadets who strutted the corridors as if they'd already conquered the sound barrier in their sleep. Alara clutched the worn leather satchel that had been her father's, its faint scent of old maps and engine oil a tangible connection to him. Inside were his cherished flight manuals, annotated with his spidery handwriting, notes that spoke of nuance and instinct, things one couldn't learn from a textbook. She wasn't flashy, didn't boast of the thousands of unofficial hours she'd logged by his side since she was old enough to see over the dashboard of their vintage Stearman. To the other cadets, and more importantly, to the Academy's commandant, she was just another legacy admission, perhaps one to be scrutinized more harshly. Commander Rex Thorne was the self-appointed gatekeeper of Aces High. He moved with a stiff-backed swagger, his uniform so sharply pressed it looked like it could draw blood, his silver hair sculpted into a severe, aerodynamic sweep. He surveyed his domain with an air of perpetual, disdainful judgment. Alara first encountered him during the orientation address. He stood at the podium, a veritable monument to his own perceived greatness. "Welcome to Aces High," Thorne had boomed, his voice resonating with an authority that brooked no dissent. "Here, we forge warriors of the sky. We demand excellence. We tolerate no weakness." His eyes, cold as glacial ice, swept across the assembled hopefuls, lingering for a fraction of a second too long on Alara. "Some of you are here because of who you know, or who your father was," a subtle, yet unmistakable emphasis. "Let me be clear. Sentimentality has no place in the cockpit of a multi-million-dollar aircraft. True grit, innate talent, that is what we look for. That is what separates the eagles from the sparrows. We will weed out the sparrows." Swiftly, Alara felt a flush creep up her neck, but kept her expression neutral. "He means me," she thought. He's already decided. The injustice of it, the dismissal before she'd even had a chance to demonstrate her capabilities, settled like a cold stone in her stomach. The proving ground came sooner than expected, during a high-fidelity simulation of an F-16 emergency landing scenario. It was a notoriously difficult test, designed to push cadets to their breaking point. Alara, however, felt a strange calm settle over her as she took the controls. The simulated cockpit felt almost like an extension of herself. Her father had drilled her relentlessly in emergency procedures, his voice a calm counterpoint to manufactured chaos. "Anticipate, Alara. Feel the machine. Don't fight it, guide it." She was handling the cascading system failures with a methodical precision that surprised even Instructor Sterling, Thorne's most sycophantic lieutenant, who was monitoring the session. The airspeed was dropping, alarms blared, the simulated landscape rushing up to meet her. Alara worked the controls, her inputs minimal, precise. She was talking through her actions, just as her father had taught her. Then it happened. A sudden, violent lurch in the simulator, a control input that wasn't hers. The stick felt dead for a split second, then over-responsive. The nose pitched wildly. What was that? Alara muttered, fighting to regain control. Alarm screamed a final, fatal warning. The screen went black, then red. Simulation failed. Catastrophic hull loss. Instructor Sterling's voice, dripping with false sympathy that didn't quite mask a smirk, crackled over the intercom. Vance, that was unfortunate. A complete loss of situational awareness. You nearly pancaked it into a populated area. Before Alara could even process what happened, or protest that the system had malfunctioned, she was summoned to Commander Thorne's office. The walk there felt like a mile through enemy territory, every gaze a judgment. Thorne didn't invite her to sit. He stood behind his vast mahogany desk, an array of commendations and photographs of himself with various dignitaries forming a shrine to his ego. Cadet Vance, he began, his tone glacial. Instructor Sterling has submitted his report. Frankly, it's abysmal. Your performance in the emergency simulation was not just substandard, it was reckless. You've demonstrated a critical lack of aptitude and an inability to handle pressure. You are a danger to yourself and, more importantly, to this institution's reputation. Sir, with all due respect, Alara began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, I believe there was a malfunction in the simulator. The controls. Thorne cut her off with a dismissive wave of his hand. Excuses, Cadet. The mark of all failures. The equipment at Aces High is state-of-the-art, meticulously maintained. The only malfunction, I assure you, was in your handling of it. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Perhaps flying isn't in your blood after all. Perhaps your father's legacy is too heavy a burden for you to carry. The words struck Alara harder than any physical blow. To have her father's memory invoked in such a cruel, dismissive way ignited a spark deep within her. He doesn't know anything about my father or about me. Therefore, Thorne continued, relishing his role as executioner. Effective immediately, your enrollment at Aces High is terminated. You will vacate your quarters by 1800 hours. We cannot afford to coddle those who clearly do not possess the right stuff. We are here to train the best, not to indulge nostalgic sentiment. He made a show of picking up a pen, a clear dismissal. Publicly, humiliatingly, Alara was escorted from the academy grounds, her few belongings hastily packed. The whispers followed her like vultures. Washed out, couldn't hack it. Thorne was right. She stood outside the gates, the setting sun casting long, accusatory shadows, her father's satchel clutched tight. Devastation warred with a cold, rising anger. She knew something had gone wrong in that simulator. She knew she hadn't failed that catastrophically on her own. And Thorne's smug, preemptive judgment reeked of setup. He wanted me out from the start, she realized with chilling certainty. This was just the excuse he needed. The memory of her father's words, spoken during a particularly challenging training flight years ago, surfaced. Integrity, Alara. It's the compass that guides you when all other instruments fail. Fight for what's right, even if you're the only one fighting. That night, in a cheap motel room miles from the academy, the initial shock gave way to a steely resolve. Commander Thorne had underestimated her. He'd mistaken her quiet demeanor for weakness, her respect for her father's legacy as a crutch. He was wrong. She wouldn't just accept this. She would find out what truly happened. And somehow, she would clear her name and honor her father's. The fight was just beginning. Alara closed her eyes, and the world of flight, the true world her father had shown her, came alive. It wasn't about the sterile precision of simulators alone, but about the feel of the wind, the song of the engine, the intricate dance of physics and instinct. She remembered cross-country flights in their restored P-51 Mustang, her father letting her take the stick for hours, talking her through weather fronts and engine diagnostics. She recalled late nights in their hangar, poring over schematics, her father explaining the elegant complexity of jet engines, the subtle genius of aerodynamic design. He hadn't just taught her to fly. He'd taught her to understand the machine, to respect its power, to become part of it. He'd even shown her maneuvers that weren't in any official training manual, techniques born from decades of experience, designed for situations where the book had run out of answers. Skills Thorn, with all his bluster, couldn't possibly comprehend. These were the skills she would now draw upon. Her first step was to seek out someone who knew Ace's high and Thorn from the inside. Her father had often spoken fondly of Mike Maverick Callahan, a brilliant instructor from his own era, a man who had left the academy under a cloud some years ago. A quick search revealed Callahan now ran a small, dusty airfield and repair shop an hour's drive away, Callahan's Corner, as the faded sign proclaimed. The airfield was a far cry from the gleaming, militaristic precision of Ace's High. It was cluttered, friendly, and smelled of honest oil and sun-baked earth. Mike Callahan was a man whose face was a roadmap of a life lived squinting into the sun and battling crosswinds. He was initially gruff when Alara introduced herself, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Vance, you say? Marcus Vance's girl." He wiped grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better decades. "Heard you were at the academy. Didn't last long, did you?" Alara felt the familiar sting, but pushed through it. "I was dismissed, Mr. Callahan. Commander Thorn said I lacked aptitude." She then recounted the simulator incident, the strange control glitch, Thorn's immediate and unappealable judgment. Callahan listened, his expression unreadable at first. Then a slow, cynical smile creased his weathered face. "Rex Thorn," he said, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. "That sanctimonious windbag. Yeah, that sounds like his style. He always had it in for your father, you know." Alara looked at him, surprised. "He did? Why?" "Marcus was everything Thorn wanted to be, but never could be," Callahan explained, leaning against a half-dismantled Cessna. "A natural pilot, respected by everyone, didn't play the political games. Thorn clawed his way up by kissing the right boots and stabbing the right backs. Your father overshadowed him without even trying, back in the day. Thorn never forgave him for that, and he hates anyone who reminds him of genuine talent, especially if they're not from his hand-picked clique of silver-spoon sycophants." Callahan's eyes, though, held a spark of something else, a shared grievance. "He pushed me out too, eventually. Said I was old-fashioned, not embracing the new doctrine's truth was I wouldn't rubber stamp his unqualified pets or his corner cutting on maintenance." A wave of relief washed over Alara. She wasn't alone, wasn't imagining the malice. "I knew something was wrong," she said. "He wanted me gone from day one. He runs that place like his personal fiefdom," Callahan affirmed. "Falsifies records, rigs tests, anything to make himself look good and eliminate anyone who might challenge his narrative or, heaven forbid, outshine him. So, what are you going to do about it, kid? Just walk away." "No," Alara said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm not. I need to find out exactly how he operates. Find proof. For my father's sake, and for my own." Callahan studied her for a long moment. Then a glint of the old maverick, the risk-taker, sparked in his eyes. "All right, Vance. All right. I might know a few ways to peek under Thorn's manicured rock." He then gestured towards a young woman in greasy overalls, expertly tuning an engine nearby, her brow furrowed in concentration. "And I think I know just the person who can help with the technical wizardry. Gabby, come here a sec." Gabby Ramirez was a whirlwind of focused energy, her dark eyes sharp and intelligent. She wiped her hands on her overalls, leaving a fresh streak of oil, and sized Alara up with open curiosity. "Gabby, this is Alara Vance," Callahan said, "daughter of Marcus Vance. She's got a score to settle with our old friend Commander Thorn. Thinks he might have played dirty." Gabby's eyebrows rose. "Thorn? Doesn't surprise me. That guy's ego has its own gravitational pull. What kind of dirty?" Alara explained her situation again. Gabby listened intently, occasionally nodding, her gaze analytical. When Alara mentioned the simulator glitch, Gabby's eyes lit up. "A control input that wasn't yours, you said? In their F-16 sim? Interesting. Those systems are supposed to be closed-loop, but there are always backdoors, diagnostic overrides." If you know where to look, she paused. I'm a mechanic, mostly, but I dabble in avionics. And I really don't like bullies who rig the game. A grin spread across her face. This could be fun. And so, an unlikely alliance was forged in the dusty, sun-drenched chaos of Callahan's Corner. Mike provided the institutional knowledge, the network of disgruntled former employees of Aces High, and the strategic overview. Gabby brought her formidable technical skills, her intuitive understanding of systems, and a hacker's curiosity. Alara provided the drive, the first-hand experience of Thorne's injustice, and a detailed memory of her father's advanced, often unconventional, flying techniques. Their investigation began discreetly. Mike Callahan, using old contacts still sympathetic to him within the Academy's lower ranks, started to gather whispers and rumors. He learned of other promising cadets, men and women from less privileged backgrounds, or those who displayed too much independent thought, who had been similarly railroaded by Thorne or Sterling on flimsy pretexts. A pattern began to emerge. Thorne was systematically weeding out genuine talent that didn't fit his preferred image of a top gun, an image that usually involved wealth, connections, or unwavering sycophancy. He manipulated flight records and simulator data, ensuring his favorite cadets looked golden while others were set up to fail. Gabby, meanwhile, delved into the technical specifications of the Academy's simulators, particularly the F-16 model Alara had failed in. Working from publicly available manuals and some less publicly available diagnostic software she acquired, she confirmed Alara's suspicion. There are definitely ways an administrator or a privileged user could introduce phantom inputs or degrade specific system responses in that simulator, Gabby announced one evening, hunched over her laptop in Callahan's cluttered office. It wouldn't even leave an obvious trace unless you knew exactly what to look for in the deep logs, which Thorne would ensure are wiped or altered. The most crucial piece of intelligence came from one of Mike's contacts. Commander Thorne was deep in preparations for the annual Wings over Westland Air Show. This year, it was a particularly big deal. A contingent of top Air Force brass, including the influential General Armstrong and several Defense Budget Committee members, would be attending. Thorne planned to personally pilot the show's star attraction, an F-22 Raptor temporarily assigned to the Academy from a nearby Air Force base for demonstration purposes. He was billing it as a display of Aces High's cutting-edge training and his own unparalleled skill, hoping to secure a massive funding increase and perhaps a promotion. He's planning a complex, high-G maneuver sequence, Mike relayed, his voice tight with concern. Something he supposedly perfected, but my source says he's only done it in the sim, and even then, he's been fudging the parameters. He's pushing the envelope, more for show than for sound aeronautics. If he messes it up in a Raptor, in front of everyone. Alara's mind raced. An F-22. Her father had flown an early prototype, had spoken of its power and grace with awe. An idea, audacious and terrifyingly beautiful, began to form. What if Thorne's grandstanding stage became his public downfall? The F-22, Alara said slowly, looking at Gabby. How secure is it when it's on the ground at the base, prepped for a show like that? Gabby's eyes gleamed. Usually very, but for air shows, especially with VIPs involved, things can get chaotic. Lots of ground crew, support staff, last-minute checks. And I happen to do some specialized contract avionics work for that very base. My credentials get me into places civilians can't go. And I might know a senior NCO in the maintenance squadron there, Sergeant Miller, who thinks Thorne is a pompous fool and owes me a couple of very big favors. Meanwhile, word of Alara's quiet inquiries with Callahan must have filtered back to Commander Thorne. One afternoon, as Alara was leaving a local library after researching FAA regulations, Instructor Sterling materialized beside her car. He leaned against it, blocking her door, his smile unpleasant. "Vance," Sterling said, his voice deceptively casual. "Still in town, I see." Commander Thorne was just saying the other day how some people just can't take a hint. This area, it's not very welcoming to failures. Might be healthier for you to move on. Find a new hobby. Knitting, perhaps. Alara met his gaze, her own calm and unwavering. "Thank you for your concern, Instructor Sterling. But I find the air here quite agreeable. He's trying to intimidate me," she thought. Which means we're getting under his skin. Thorne's arrogance was his Achilles heel. He couldn't conceive of her as a genuine threat, merely an annoyance to be swatted away. This underestimation was their greatest advantage. The plan solidified, each piece clicking into place with a thrilling, terrifying precision. It was daring, almost insanely so, but it was also elegant in its simplicity. They wouldn't try to steal the F-22. They wouldn't sabotage Thorne. Alara would fly it. She would fly it before Thorne could, right under his nose, and demonstrate what true skill, honed by dedication and integrity, looked like. Gabby was the linchpin for access. Her contact, Sergeant Miller, was indeed sympathetic. Miller, a veteran NCO with little patience for glory-seeking officers like Thorne, confirmed that Thorne had been demanding and dismissive towards the ground crew responsible for the Raptor. He also confirmed Thorne's flight plan included a particularly risky inverted supersonic pass that Miller himself thought was idiotic showboating. Miller agreed, after much persuasion from Gabby and an appeal to his own sense of justice, and the promise of Gabby fixing his classic motorcycle's temperamental electronics to create a very narrow window of opportunity. He would log a last-minute, critical pre-flight diagnostic check on the F-22's avionics, specifically requesting Gabby's expertise due to a newly discovered software anomaly just minutes before Thorne was scheduled for his walk-around and cockpit entry. Alara, disguised in a generic flight suit and helmet, would accompany Gabby as her assistant. Mike Callahan's role was communications and evidence. He would use a modified scanner to tap into the airshow's public address frequency and, crucially, the open channel Thorne would be using. He also compiled a dossier, sworn affidavits from other cadets Thorne had wronged, Gabby's analysis of the simulator vulnerabilities, and expert testimony from Callahan himself on the dangers of Thorne's planned maneuver versus the safe, technically superior alternative Alara would fly, a sequence her father had developed. The stakes were astronomically high. If caught, Alara faced charges of unauthorized aircraft operation, trespassing on a military installation, and a host of other felonies that would see her imprisoned for years. Gabby and Mike would be accessories, their careers and reputations destroyed. But the thought of Thorne, resplendent in his self-importance, being publicly exposed by the very failure he had created, was a powerful motivator. Alara spent hours in Callahan's rickety old simulator, then visualizing every second of the F-22 flight, her father's voice or co-pilot, guiding her through each precise maneuver. She wasn't just flying for herself anymore. She was flying for every pilot Thorne had wronged, for the integrity of the profession her father had cherished. Commander Thorne, meanwhile, was oblivious, basking in the pre-airshow media attention. He gave bombastic interviews, promising a display of aerial prowess never before witnessed, subtly hinting that his techniques were revolutionizing flight training. He was, as Callahan dryly remarked, fattening himself up for the slaughter. His arrogance blinded him, his contempt for Alara so profound he couldn't imagine her capable of anything more than quiet resentment. He had even, according to Sergeant Miller, dismissed several routine safety checks on a Raptor as unnecessary distractions, further alienating the ground crew. Airshow day dawned bright and clear, a perfect azure canvas for what was to come. The atmosphere at Westland Air Force Base was electric. Crowds thronged the viewing areas, the scent of popcorn and aviation fuel mingling in the warm air. Fighter jets from various squadrons were already on display, gleaming under the sun. The F-22 Raptor, an angular masterpiece of aerospace engineering, sat in a cordoned-off VIP section of the tarmac, looking like a predator coiled to strike. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs, a wild drumbeat against the calm facade she projected. She wore a plain olive-flight suit, her hair tucked tightly under a standard-issue helmet, visor down. Gabby, looking remarkably official in crisp overalls with avionics support patches, carried a heavy toolkit. Sergeant Miller met them at the security checkpoint, his face impassive. Ramirez, your assistant, he grunted, barely glancing at Alara. Thorn's due in 15. Make it quick. This anomaly better be real. Count on it, Sarge, Gabby said with a confident wink he didn't return. They walked towards the Raptor, past bustling ground crews and self-important officials. Alara focused on her breathing, on the feel of her father's dog tags tucked inside her flight suit, cool against her skin. This is it. No turning back. Gabby exchanged a few technical-sounding pleasantries with the two young airmen guarding the F-22, flashed her credentials, and mentioned Sergeant Miller's urgent request. They stepped aside, more bored than suspicious. Gabby expertly opened a panel near the cockpit, plugged in a diagnostic tablet, and made a show of frowning at the screen. Yep, just as I thought. Fluctuating data stream on the secondary bus. Need to access the cockpit interface to recalibrate. Alara's cue. Gabby nodded almost imperceptibly. Alara climbed the boarding ladder, her movements economical, practiced. She slipped into the Raptor's cockpit. It felt right, like coming home. The layout was more advanced than anything her father had flown, but the soul of the machine was familiar. Her hands moved surely over the controls, initiating the pre-start sequence, her mind a steel trap of checklists and procedures. From her vantage point, she saw Commander Thorn striding across the tarmac, resplendent in his flight gear, a gaggle of aides and a news crew trailing in his wake. He was gesturing expansively, no doubt already narrating his impending triumph. He was about 50 yards away. Time was up. Gabby now, Alara whispered into the small comm unit tucked in her helmet. Gabby slammed the access panel shut. All clear here. Looks like a minor sensor misalignment. She's good to go, she called to the airman, then gave Alara a thumbs up and melted back towards Sergeant Miller, who was suddenly looking very busy elsewhere. Alara sealed the canopy. The roar of the outside world muted to a dull hum. She took a deep breath. For Dad. Then, with practiced efficiency, she brought the Raptor's twin Pratt and Whitney F-119 engines to life. Their deep, powerful rumble vibrated through her, a song of immense power. Commander Thorn stopped dead in his tracks. His jaw literally dropped. He saw the canopy closed, saw the heat haze shimmering from the engines. Confusion, then disbelief, then pure, undiluted rage contorted his features. He started to run, shouting, waving his arms. Too late. Alara Vance, the failure, the Sparrow, taxied the F-22 Raptor onto the active runway with a grace that belied the turmoil surely erupting around her. She could hear the air traffic controller's frantic calls at her headset, but Mike Callahan, true to his word, was already working his magic. Westland Tower, this is unscheduled flight demonstration. Call sign Vindicator. Alara's voice, calm and clear, suddenly boomed over the airshow's public address system, overriding the startled announcer. Mike had patched her through. My name is Alara Vance. I was dismissed from Aces High Academy by Commander Thorn, who deemed me unfit to fly. Today, I offer a different assessment. She pushed the throttles forward. The Raptor leaped down the runway, then climbed into the sky with a vertical performance that stole the breath from the crowd below. Thorn, standing impotently on the tarmac, was a rapidly shrinking figure of fury. Alara then began her aerial ballet. It wasn't just a demonstration, it was a masterpiece. She performed a flawless series of maneuvers, some standard, some breathtakingly original, including the very same complex, high-G sequence Thorn had planned to showcase. But where Thorn's simulated attempts had been ragged and pushed safety limits, Alara's execution was poetry in motion, precise, fluid, and utterly controlled. She made the F-22 dance. Commander Thorn claims to have perfected this sequence. Alara's voice narrated, cool and professional, as she executed a perfect 8-point roll followed by a sustained inverted pass, far cleaner than anything Thorn had managed in simulations. However, Academy records, if undoctored, would show numerous safety violations in his practice runs. True skill is not about reckless grandstanding. It's about precision, control, and respect for the machine. She then transitioned into a maneuver her father had sketched in his old notebooks, a graceful, energy-conserving climbing spiral culminating in a stall turn that defied gravity, a signature move Thorne could never have replicated. This flight is dedicated to the memory of Colonel Marcus Vance, and to all skilled pilots unfairly dismissed because they didn't fit a preconceived mold. On the ground, chaos reigned among the officials. Thorne was apoplectic, screaming for interceptors to be scrambled for Alara to be shot down. Air-base security forces were mobilizing. But General Armstrong, the highest-ranking Air Force officer present, a man known for his calm judgment and keen eye for talent, held up a hand. He was watching Alara's flight, not with anger, but with a look of stunned admiration. "Hold your fire," he commanded into his radio. "Let's see what she's got." That is exceptional flying. He'd heard the name Vance, and a flicker of recognition crossed his face. He'd known Marcus Vance by reputation. Alara's flight lasted precisely 10 minutes. 10 minutes of aerial brilliance that rewrote her story. As her final maneuver, she brought the F-22 in for a landing. Not a showy, carrier-style slam, but a gentle, perfect kiss of the runway, the aircraft settling as lightly as a feather despite its immense weight. She taxied it back to its exact parking spot, powered down the engines, and opened the canopy. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the distant wail of sirens. Then, a smattering of applause from the stunned crowd, growing into a roar. Armed military police surrounded the Raptor instantly. Commander Thorne, his face purple with fury, shoved his way through. "Arrest her! Arrest that woman! She stole a United States Air Force asset. This is treason." Alara unstrapped herself and climbed calmly down the ladder, helmet under her arm. She stood tall, meeting Thorne's glare without flinching. General Armstrong arrived, flanked by his aides, his expression stern but thoughtful. "Commander Thorne," Alara said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet, "I believe this aircraft performed rather well. Perhaps the aptitude issue was misdiagnosed." Before Thorne could explode again, Mike Callahan stepped forward from the edge of the crowd, a thick dossier in his hand. "General Armstrong, sir, if I may, my name is Mike Callahan, former chief instructor at Aces High. This dossier contains evidence of Commander Thorne's systematic manipulation of records, endangerment of cadets, and the specific technical flaws in the flight plan he intended to execute today. It also includes sworn statements from numerous cadets unfairly dismissed by him." Gabby Ramirez joined them, holding up a data chip. "And this, General, contains the full, unedited telemetry from Ms. Vance's flight, alongside the doctored simulator logs from Commander Thorne's practices. The contrast is illuminating." General Armstrong took the dossier, his eyes scanning the first page. He looked from Thorne's apoplectic face to Alara's calm composure, then back to the F-22, now silent and magnificent. Several other individuals, former cadets whom Mike had alerted, began to emerge from the crowd, their faces grim but resolute, ready to corroborate the claims. Thorne sputtered, "Lies. All lies. This is a conspiracy. She's a disgruntled failure, and these are her accomplices." But his bluster sounded hollow, desperate. The sheer, undeniable skill of Alara's flight, witnessed by thousands, including seasoned aviators, spoke louder than any denial. This simple woman, the failure, had not only landed an F-22 on their turf, she had landed a decisive blow against a corrupt and arrogant system. The immediate aftermath was swift. General Armstrong, after a brief, private consultation with his legal team and a pointed review of some of Callahan's evidence, relieved Commander Thorne of his command on the spot, pending a full investigation. "Commander," Armstrong stated, his voice like chipped granite, "your actions today, and those alleged in this report, are deeply concerning. You will be confined to base pending further orders." Thorne's face went slack, the color draining from it. Instructor Sterling, who had been hovering nearby, tried to sidle away, but was sharply called back by one of Armstrong's aides. "Alara, though technically in a world of trouble for the unauthorized flight, was treated with a surprising degree of professionalism. General Armstrong himself spoke to her. "Ms. Vance," he said, "what you did today was incredibly reckless and incredibly skilled. Your father was a great man. It seems he taught you well." The investigation into Aces High was thorough and damning. Thorne's carefully constructed facade of excellence crumbled, revealing a rotten core of cronyism, falsified records, and abuse of power. He was dishonorably discharged and faced multiple charges, including fraud and reckless endangerment. His enablers, like Sterling, found their careers similarly curtailed. Aces High was restructured from the ground up. New leadership, handpicked by General Armstrong, was installed with a mandate to prioritize genuine skill, integrity, and safety above all else. The Academy's reputation, though battered, began a slow process of rebuilding, this time on a foundation of truth. And Alara? After a tense period of legal limbo, the Air Force, heavily influenced by General Armstrong's advocacy and the undeniable evidence of her exceptional abilities, not to mention the public relations nightmare of prosecuting the pilot who had so spectacularly exposed a corrupt commander, opted for a pragmatic solution. She received a formal reprimand for the unauthorized flight, a slap on the wrist, all things considered. More importantly, General Armstrong, recognizing a once-in-a-generation talent, personally offered her a place in an advanced Air Force flight training program, a direct path to flying the most sophisticated aircraft in the world, legitimately this time. Alara accepted. She had not sought glory, only justice. But in fighting for her father's honor and her own integrity, she had rediscovered her purpose, a purpose that now soared free and limitless. Gabby Ramirez, whose technical prowess had been showcased, received several lucrative job offers from aerospace contractors, finally gaining the recognition she deserved. Mike Callahan, vindicated, became an unofficial elder statesman, occasionally consulted by the new regime at Aces High. And so, Commander Thorne's reign of arrogance ended, not with the roar of jets under his command, but with the perfect, almost silent landing of an F-22 piloted by the very woman he had so contemptuously dismissed. Alara Vance didn't just get her wings back. She earned them in a trial by fire, proving to the world, and more importantly to herself, that true talent, coupled with unwavering determination and a strong moral compass, can overcome even the most entrenched injustice. The real lesson here, isn't it, is to never judge a book by its cover, and certainly never, ever, underestimate the quiet ones. They might just be meticulously planning to land a state-of-the-art fighter jet squarely on your oversized ego. Alara found peace, not in revenge, but in the restoration of truth and the promise of a future where she could honor her father's legacy by being the best pilot she could be, guided by integrity and the boundless sky. What did you think of Alara's incredible comeback? Share your final thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of audacious vindication, please do hit that like button, subscribe for more tales like this, and maybe share it with someone who needs a reminder that the underdog can and often does win.